Thank you for tuning in to the Practical Preservation Podcast. Please take a moment to visit our website, practicalpreservationservices.com, for additional information and tips to help you restore your historical home. If you've not done so, please subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, and also like us on Facebook. Welcome to the Practical Preservation Podcast, hosted by Danielle and Jonathan Kepperling. Kepperling Preservation Services is a family-owned business based in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, dedicated to the preservation of our built architectural history for today's use as well as future generations. Our weekly podcast provides you with expert advice specific to the unique needs of renovating a historic home, educating by sharing our From the Trenches preservation knowledge and our guests' expertise, balancing modern needs while maintaining the historical significance, character, and beauty of your period home.
Today on the Practical Preservation Podcast, we have Jeffrey Marshall with us from the Heritage Conservancy. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So tell me a little bit about your background.
Well, my background is I am a graduate of Penn State University, went there undergrad and grad school. My background was in architecture and early American history, and fresh out of grad school, I ended up doing work in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, researching old houses in and around Washington's Crossing.
Oh, very interesting. Okay, so what drew you into architecture, preservation, history?
I always liked architecture. I think history probably started when I was 11 years old and went to Williamsburg. And then when I was younger, I went to Gettysburg. So the idea of history, American military history, and architecture were just things I always enjoyed.
Okay,
very small.
Yeah, and I think too having those places to visit gives us like it's almost like going back and seeing what it was like. So I think that especially for children, I think that really makes it makes that impression.
No, I think it had a profound influence on me. And then as far as doing my natural conservation work, is going out and walking in the woods. So it's an appreciation for both our history and our environment. That's how I grew up.
Yes. Okay, well, tell me a little bit about the work that the Heritage Conservancy does.
Well, we are a regional organization based in Southeastern Pennsylvania, Bucks County. And what we do is we preserve historic places and open spaces. In our organization, we don't pull apart whether it's natural, whether it's historic, whether it's scenic, whether it's farmland preservation. All we try to do is maintain the community health and vitality, environmental, social, cultural, and create a place or preserve a place that future generations will want to be and can enjoy as much as we do. So we are, I guess, a place-based organization and try to keep our little corner of the earth special. And it's not unlike other similar organizations in other special places throughout the country.
Yeah. Okay, and I know some of your education outreach involves the house detective. Can you talk to me about that a little bit?
Sure. Again, with our historic preservation aspects, we do National Register nominations, we do historic surveys, we do all that type of stuff. But really what seems to resonate with people, especially in Bucks County, where the quintessential old stone Bucks County farmhouse exists, is people want to know the story behind their house. And so over the years, with background in history and in architecture, what we do is we give them a narrative story from William Penn, who's owned the building, when we think the building was constructed, certain facts we found about the architecture and about the people, and do the genealogy of the house.
Oh, very cool. Do you so I guess you pretty much go through and find the house history and then write the narrative. I'm assuming, you go through the public records. Yeah,
exactly. Public records, and then private historical society here in Bucks County is very good. So they have old newspapers, orphan sports, trying to put things like that. And then architecture, we look at and see how's the house put together.
Right.
100 years ago, Henry Mercer, who
Oh, yes.
county,
I was actually just talking about that earlier this week.
Came up with the idea. A house can't be any older than the construction materials and methods that it was constructed.
Right.
So you look at it and say it's got hand wrought nails, it's got ribbon lat, it's got this type of stuff. Then you get an idea when it was built.
Mm-hmm.
It's like in 100 years from now, when people pull apart a house and they see drywall screws, they know it's not going to be from 1950.
Right.
And it's really the same thing. It's just knowing what features are illustrative or indicative, and then put it in the concept of architectural style, which most people can study. A general bell-shaped curve. Somebody built this house in this style, then everybody builds it, then it wanes, and your house was probably built someplace in the middle. We put it all together, and then we guess how old the house is.
Well, and sometimes it is a guess.
There's no such thing as a building permit in 1744.
That's true. Yes. Yeah, but it's true when you look at things. I was at a building low in southern Lancaster County, and they're like, "Oh, it's mid 1800s." I'm like, "There's no way. This building's much earlier." I said, "There's no saw marks in this." But they just didn't know what they were looking at, and so it's true. You can look at things and tell kind of at least when the period would be. Maybe not to the exact date, but you can tell that.
And most people don't have a lot of real life experience.
That's true. I mean, well, and and I sometimes
you've been to 4,000, 10,000, whatever it's been, buildings.
Right.
You get a feel.
Yeah, you do. So do you do that just in the Bucks County area, or do you limit your region?
We do it regionally. That's a good word to say. Montgomery County, Chester County, Delaware County, Northampton County, Lehigh County, across the river into New Jersey. Anywhere where the regional architecture has the same pattern makes it transferable.
Right.
I yell at people who come from New England and say, "Well, I can date an old house within 5 years." Well, maybe in New England, but the trends are different here.
It's different.
So
it is. Yeah.
There's enough of a trend, even as far as Lancaster and Center County. I've done projects.
Okay. Very interesting. I know Laura, who helps me set up the podcast. I know she had sent me the picture of, was that you dressed up as a detective?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, in order to make it a little more entertaining, we euphemistically call this Sherlock Holmes, house detective. Holmes without an L.
Yeah.
So that's what we do, just to try to make it entertaining as well as informative.
Okay. Very, very, I think that's a great offering that you have. And I think that people who are in love with their old buildings really want to know the history and want to be able to tell people the history. So I think that's really a good place to be. I know, okay. I saw when I was on the website this morning that you use easements to protect properties and land. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
We have both what we call conservation easements and preservation easements, depending on whether it's 100 acres of land or maybe a smaller property that has a significant historic resource or resources. So we have easements on about 14 or 15,000 acres throughout the region, and about 24 on preservation easements. The land easements are much more popular than the preservation.
Right.
And in both cases, we work with the property owner to identify what their vision for the property is forever.
Right.
After we're all gone, we try to put that vision in a document called an easement, preservation or conservation easement. That easement is recorded. It then is in perpetuity. It means all future property owners have to abide by it, and it's in our responsibility to monitor and enforce that easement forever.
Yeah.
And so that's what our organization primarily does.
So do you, if somebody wants to make a change or needs to repair something, you have to go out and approve it or give guidance? Is that?
Exactly. We hope that we don't make it too stifling, and that what we're really concerned about, either with the land or the building, are what are the character defining elements, and those are what you want to protect. I don't want to micromanage and say, what color do you paint your windows?
Right.
Swing set out back. But we don't want you to make changes that impact the very conservation values for which the building or the property is preserved.
Yeah, and I agree with that philosophy, and I tell people that a lot, that you don't want to do something that can't be undone, like yeah. The one reason I want to talk a little bit about easements was because I think a lot of people are under the assumption that like listing on the National Register protects you from demolition or some of those other listings, and it doesn't. And I think that that's something that homeowners often assume will protect them, and it doesn't, or protect the building.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Right. You're absolutely correct. People are under that misconception.
Right.
A lot of National Register nominations, and they protect properties from government actions, but not from private individuals doing what they want. So if there is a desire to pay homage to a property you've owned for years and want to make, or homage to your ancestors,
right,
the only way to really do it is to charge somebody with the responsibility of enforcing that forever. And that's what an easement does, as compared to a deed restriction or something like that, or legislation, which we know in the current climate are being rescinded right now.
Well, I was just going to say, legislation's as good as the people enforcing it.
It's a tool, but it certainly isn't a permanent tool for learning.
Yeah, that is true. So, what challenges and trends do you see in preservation or in conservation?
Well, there are some in both, obviously.
Yeah.
Preservation there's probably, at least in Bucks County, seems to be less and less attraction or fascination with old houses. I've been doing this for 40 years, and people were dying to get beautiful old Bucks County stone farmhouses. Now people don't seem to want to live that way. They want modern conveniences, and if they buy an old house, they put a huge addition on it or change it so much you don't sell. So that's one issue. The second issue is money, in terms of money for preservation. Both money to do it right, and then money to find the artisans who can do it right. It's very difficult, and that's one of the issues we're having nationwide. Is people just don't have the experience in doing this kind of work. With land conservation, it's competition for the land by other groups, people, organizations, be it homeowners, developers. Seen a lot of pipelines, things going through that have an impact on important natural areas. We're doing a project in the area called the Quakertown Swamp, and for hundreds of years, people wanted to drain swamps. To get the political analogy there for a second, but right now we understand how important inland wetlands are for water recharge, for purification, for all the things. And what used to be seen as wasted space or vacant space is really an important part of the ecosystem. And that recognition and that education is a challenge for us. And we have to engage new people, broader, diverse audiences. Not just the people who own the property in the case of open space or in the case of a historic building, but the entire community to understand that they are important for biological, social, or cultural reasons.
I agree with you on that, because I've started to see a trend too, in like, even if they're building a development in and around Lancaster, that they're trying to at least like retain some of that buffer of the natural wetlands, and it makes sense. It makes sense to let it work the way it's way that it has worked for many years, rather than trying to put man-made solutions in.
Oh yeah. Natural ecosystems is kind of the buzz term for doing that stuff. The green infrastructure versus gray infrastructure, and that is going to become more and more important in the future. And I think an issue with the historic preservation is a greater percentage of the population aren't native to the county, and in Lancaster. But when 40% of the people were there for generations or more, and now that's down to 20%, that public appreciation of the heritage of an area is almost like it's not their heritage, it was somebody else's. They feel as strongly towards protecting it as toward their families. And that's a conundrum that I don't know what we can do.
I agree with you on that, and I'm just finishing reading a book, and it's really an interesting book. At first, I thought it was going to be like history based, but it's really not. It's called Northern Slavery, but he's a psychologist, and he wrote it from the understanding of collective memory. And one of the things he talks about is people moving away. And if people move away and the places are not kept so that people can see it and keep remembering, eventually, the stories don't get passed on and nobody remembers. Everybody just thinks it didn't happen.
Right. And that just becomes a building with a financial burden that nobody really cares about.
Right. So that theme seems to be like, that was interesting to me from a preservation standpoint, to connect that thought of places as kind of like touchstones to our history, exactly. Which I had never really looked at it that way before.
No, and I agree. And I do a lot with barn preservation. It's the same thing. Barns are big, beautiful building out in the rural landscape.
Yeah.
But they are tremendous works of craftsmanship, dedication, passion for the people who built them, as well as for their functional use, for processing and storing of grain.
Right.
And if you only look at it from that aspect, you're missing more than half the story.
Yeah. I agree with you. So is there anything that you wanted to share that maybe we didn't get a chance to touch on?
I think the fact that it's becoming more and more incumbent on us in the land trust and historic preservation world to really reach out to a broader, younger, diverse audience and try to show our relevance. You use the term touchstone, but what is the relevance of what we think is important to future generations? And it's a story that we have to tell. We can no longer be content to save a building or save a piece of land and do the transaction. We really have to explain the why as much as doing it, and how it positively affects everybody, and conversely, how not preserving things negatively affects everybody, whether you own it or not.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I've seen a trend too in trying to tell more of a complete, diverse story in the interpretation of historic sites. And I think that is one way to really help people feel like it's their history too, to everybody to be included.
Very few of us are families that have been here from the colonial period.
Right.
Most of us are descended from immigrants from somewhere. So why do we care? Or why should we care about something that's not directly related to our history, except that we now live in that community and we are caretakers and custodians of that for future generations?
Yeah, I agree. So how can someone support your organization?
Well, we would love for people to become members of our organization or support us financially. I believe our mission is important to everyone, and our best way is through a website in the 21st century, and our website is www.heritageconservancy.org, and they can go on and see all the things that we're trying to do to connect with people and to find the important things in our community and make sure they're there, not just for future generations, but for current generations.
Right.
Anything in the last year, it's that people really appreciate being able to get out into nature and experience it themselves. When I started, we were always talking about future generations. Well, now we're worried about preserving things for the current generation.
Right. Yeah.
Urgency is much greater than it used to be. So yes, get involved either with our land trust, our historic organization, or another one, and try to make a difference in your own backyard.
Oh, thank you. And so to contact you, the best way is through the website?
Yes.
Okay.
We will answer every inquiry.
Okay. Well, very good. I will. We'll also, when this gets posted on our website, we'll have a link to your website too. So if somebody listens, they didn't write it down, they can go there and find you easily. Well, thank you very much for your time today.
Oh, I enjoyed it. I hope people learned something and will take action.
Yes.
No matter what you do, just take an action.
Yeah, I agree.
Thanks for listening to the Practical Preservation Podcast. The resources discussed during this episode are on our website at practicalpreservationservices.com/podcast. If you received value from this episode and know someone else that will get value from it as well, please share it with them. Join us next week for another episode of the Practical Preservation Podcast. For more information on restoring your historic home, visit practicalpreservationservices.com.